She got laid off on a Friday afternoon and immediately popped a bottle of champagne.
Hosting her own severance package.
That's not rock bottom. That's page 1 of her book.
Our guest spent 2 decades inside Fortune 500s and hypergrowth startups, driving the kind of change that moves people and business forward.
Then in the spring of 2025, she blew it all up. On purpose. 15 years ahead of her own retirement plan to write the book and start a nonprofit. Our way. Retail Women in Tech. All at once.
Her new book asks a simple but uncomfortable question. What if you stopped chasing your career and started choosing it?
I hope it's after hours because grab a glass of bubbles. This isn't book talk.
It's a moment to reflect on your own story and rewrite it mid-story.
Now let's meet our latest retail transformer, Shannon Flanagan.
Welcome to Retail Transformers, candid conversations with the visionaries shaping the future of commerce. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
I'm Casey Golden. Welcome back, Retail Razor fans. This is the podcast where we cut through the clutter to bring you the sharpest insights from the leaders redefining retail, careers, and frankly, the future.
Our guest has spent her career inside complex organizations, helping other people navigate reinvention, organizational design, leadership development, change management. Then in the spring of 2025, she turned that lens on herself. The book is called Choose, Don't Chase Your Career. And it's not a polished 5-step formula. It's built around 3 parts: the break, the pause, and the rewrite.
Life is messy. She'll tell you straight up. She didn't have it all figured out before she wrote the book, telling other women how to figure it out. She still doesn't. That's kind of the whole point.
Beyond the book, she's the founder of Retail Women in Tech, a nonprofit built around mentorship, community, and creating more room for women in the rooms where decisions get made.
So today we're talking about the ladder versus the stack. The money question nobody says out loud, the in-between that nobody wants to sit in, and what it costs to choose your career instead of chasing it.
If you're in the middle of your own reinvention or thinking about starting one, you're going to want to stay for this one.
But before we get started, let's thank our sponsor, Retail Club.
Retail and brand leaders can attend Retail Club AI Festival completely budget-free, plus get $1,750 toward travel and hotel. From the founders of Shop Talk and Grocery Shop, it's 3 days, fully outdoors in Huntington Beach, September 22nd to 24th, with 2,000 senior leaders working through how AI is transforming retail. If you're shaping AI's future in retail, budget shouldn't be why you miss it. Register by August 28th at retailclub.com/retail-razor-podcast. Casey and I hope to see you there. A big thank you to Retail Club for helping us bring you this podcast and all the other shows in the Retail Razor Podcast Network.
All right, Retail Razors, let's go. Please welcome to Retail Transformers, author, founder, and life coach, Shannon Flanagan.
Shannon, welcome to the show.
Does your coffee cup have 3 handles? But just wait, I'm going to use it. It's a prop.
Oh, I can't wait to hear this part of the story.
Wait a minute. Oh, it's a prop. You're gonna hear it.
This is exciting.
So you hear
we
what's
even
on.
get props this time. Wow.
Yes.
This is way to encourage all listeners to actually want to watch on video now, because
Yes, exactly.
there's no way we're going to be able to describe this for the listeners if they're not watching on YouTube. So it's even more exciting to have you on the show today, then.
It is. Oh my goodness. Let's just get
Let's dive in.
right into it. You wrote this book while starting a nonprofit and stepping away from a paycheck all at the same time. 15 years ahead of your someday timeline. What was the catalyst that motivated you to sit down and put pen to paper when you already had a full plate?
There were 2 moments that happened in my life early in 2025. One was, I always knew that Retail Women in Tech would be a nonprofit. When I, quote unquote, retired at 65, I wanted to run a nonprofit. Not found one, that was not on my bingo card. But one night, late at night, my fiance says, I think you need to go all in. And it's very important for the audience to understand, I've never struck it rich, wrong place, wrong time. I live in the second most expensive area in the country. I have 3 teenagers. I pay my ex-husband handsomely. So to make that decision was a really big deal. So I was hemming and hawing over that. Then I get a text and then a call with Nicola Consuela, who was one of the women who helped write the book. And she says, I want to write a book with you. I've always wanted to do it on my checklist or, life list. And maybe we should do it about the women in Artwood. So that was the second thing I wanted to do when I retired. I'd already had 2 other books in my mind based on a similar format. And so the 2 things I wanted to do were manifesting themselves in front of me 15 years ahead of schedule. And there had been a conversation I'd had several weeks earlier when I was at E-Tail Palm Springs. And this woman comes up to me after I'd done an event and says, I'd love to talk to you. So we get a glass of wine at the bar in the middle of the hotel. And she talks about, how unhappy she is in her job. She was probably in her early 30s, so kind of mid-career. She had this misnomer that the higher up she got, the easier it got. And so it's like, no, it gets harder and harder. But she wasn't happy. She had just bought a house. She had just had a baby. And we really started to dive into what really, fuels your fire? What are you really excited about? And it had nothing to do with the job she was doing. But she was sticking with that job because she one day wanted to retire with her husband in Italy, and she wanted the money to do it. And I was like, oh my God, we have no idea what's going to happen. That's 20 years from now, and you're making decisions based on that. And so when the 2 moments came into my life and I reflected on that conversation, I was like, I'd be a false prophet if I didn't go to it. And because of Retail Women in Tech, I'd heard of so many women's stories about what they wanted to do that they weren't doing. So I decided to go all in. And the book is really a reflection of my own journey to get where I am.
And how many hours do you sleep?
Yeah, really.
Okay, so that's a whole other thing.
That's a completely separate discussion.
I work more than I've ever worked in my life. I'm the most stressed. I am poor by this. I am the most fulfilled, but I compare myself to other founders who work 18 hours a day. I now work 12, which is a lot for me. I mean, 10 to 12 and on the weekends.
Right.
But
yeah,
I still feel like I'm not doing enough. That's a whole nother problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we're all kind of part of this club. You thought
Yes.
it.
Well,
Yeah.
So should I
right.
wait on the prop or let's get the teaser going? So let's see. How do I show it? So here's a great story that we do a annual Gays and Gals Christmas party, and we always have a secret or whatever that white elephant. And I could grab this one that, can you guys see the cup? Can you
I
guys
see that
it?
there's multiple handles.
There's
Yeah.
multiple
I can't read
handles. It says on there is, I literally do not know what I'm doing. I was like, that couldn't be more perfect for what I'm doing.
Okay.
I don't know what but I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
Perfect. There you go. Well, let's maybe look at how you open the book, because you jump right in, kind of like how we just jumped into this discussion. You just jump right in at the beginning of the book.
You guys are 2 of my favorite friends.
Chirk. Just jump.
Everybody listening, get ready for a 4-hour episode. Just say it. So let's start with where the book opens. You start with the story of you getting laid off, right? And then you stop at a store, you get a bottle of champagne and toast your own severance package by noon. So walk us through this moment and what that meant for you at that time.
It's one of the most powerful experiences I had in my life. I would say it drove the pivot to where I am now. I always knew, right, in retail, the higher up I got, right, I'd been a VP for several years, that I would get laid off at some point. But this one came out of nowhere. Yeah. I'll give you the trailer version because there's a whole chapter, as you just said, dedicated to that. I was in a situation, I was working for the president of a company, and over time, our relationship started to change. I've always been a change practitioner, so one of the things I have to be is a truth teller. Doesn't always land well for, in particular, new leaders, as they might have some insecurities about what they were doing. and knew that our relationship was becoming strained. I ended up then spending more time because she kind of kicked me to the chief HR officer. And we were trying to figure out how my role should evolve and how I was really trying to better meet the needs of the president based on where she was. And I was supposed to have a meeting with her. And I go around the corner and I see this woman, Sheila, who I'd been working for, the head of HR. And she looks at me and she starts like this face on her, the look on her face. And she says, "You need to come in." And she had been also completely blindsided that the president had made the decision to let me go. And when that happened, one, I mean, I'm very emotional, right? But as I walked out of that room, I went and got the bottle of champagne. I sat out on my deck on a gorgeous day and I celebrated because I knew that I was not being laid off because of my skills and my contributions and what I gave. I understood it was really coming from somebody else's perspective. And little did I know, I didn't know my celebration was going to become the change and the catalyst that my life became as a result of it. And I knew I was going to be okay. Now, didn't hurt that I had a really nice severance package, but it did create finally the space, and part of the reason why the book is structured like it is, because it allowed me to have a pause. So I know we're going to get into that topic as we move forward here.
Yeah. Well, there's another line in the book that I think maybe relates to this too, that where you talk about the ladder, which is something like everybody's heard this, metaphor for corporate life, right? About climbing the corporate ladder. And you kind of reference it how, your choices are basically, you step off the ladder. Well, that's like a foolish move to do because then you're just falling off, right? Or you jump to another ladder. It's kind of gives the impression you're lost and you don't know where you're going. And then you're told if you pause though, to reflect on all of it, well, then you're just going to fall behind. But this is basically how every corporate world works, right? Every corporate ladder works this way. And this is what everyone's been told. Yep. So what's your take on that?
This is one I could spend hours and hours on. And I luckily have the good fortune of, well, there's a whole story about me stepping off the ladder, which was my first WTF moment. I'm going to talk about a few other things. Like the reality is we've been conditioned to believe that success follows, this straight path. Mm-hmm. Right. And this myth, I think, is especially potent for women. I think this is now more and more true even for men. But despite decades of progress, we're still expected to prove ourselves constantly and to make the safe, smart moves. The reality is the research shows that there is this huge emotional and systemic toll on women and the pressure of those, especially in leadership. So leanin.org and Deloitte did a report. And by the way, their reports every year are so insightful, but that 6 in 10 senior level women are frequently feeling burned out, not because they aren't strong enough, but because the system was never designed with them in mind. So you think about you come back, our corporate system is designed to climb the ladder. The reality is, though, we do at Retail Women in Tech, we do a Power of We Wednesday interview series. We've done over 80 now. Not one has had a linear career path. But we operate in a world that apparently, right, that is still the same mindset. And we see it. And I don't know how many of you guys have talked to people who are in the job market and they have gone through, it's just an absolute nightmare that the hiring managers and companies will say they're looking for a generalist. But as people move through the 5 to 7 interviews, they still are hiring for this deep functional expertise. So we've got this schism between the reality of what really makes great talent, which is those that have got, a potpourri of the reasons why. That might have been my ding. Sorry, guys. Don't even know how to turn it on or off. Don't have any notifications coming on.
Just blame it on Microsoft.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I told that we, with Retail Women in Tech, the origin story really came from how do we build the bridges across all the sectors and have an appreciation for transferable skills. When it comes to us personally, right, we're fine. We continue to go for jobs that we've already had because it feels safe, and because we are rewarded in this deep functional expertise. But that's not what makes the greatest leaders, nor does it allow you the chance and to actually go after what you do want. So the real power isn't climbing faster, but maybe it's stepping off altogether, right? Choosing intentionally over inertia, and really understanding meaning and healing over the hustle. I do believe, like one of the things you said in terms of the ladder is that we also, when we also can go through like trauma in some of our jobs when we keep climbing up that ladder. So I think it's important. I think we as individuals understand the value, like are not as afraid of stepping off the functional ladder, but we still have an industry that's hiring for it. So a lot of opportunities there for us to change the narrative and the reality.
Yeah, it always, I'm of an age where you can't have any gaps in your resume, God forbid. And
Right.
you have to apply vertical. Like you can't apply horizontally. It has to be like, you can't even take like 2 steps up. You're taking the next step up or the same exact job at a larger company, right? And then the same exact job at a larger company. That was kind of what we were trained and like programmed, like that's what you're doing. And I stepped off. I don't know if I just didn't get on early enough, but like, I always wanted to have my hand in the cookie jar of what I wanted to learn next and what I wanted to do next. It was all made sense to me on like who I want to teach me, what company I want to help, who I believe in the industry to win, who I want, to be a part of that story. And I always felt like my resume was a shit show unless you met me, because it's just like zigzagging all over the place. And I'm like, nope, straight line. We just have to have a conversation.
If we just, like as leaders, don't you want, like you just said something that I want to come back. You were curious and you wanted to learn. And isn't that like so much more valuable than somebody's that's deep in functional expertise? Now I'm hoping, fingers crossed, like in the world of AI, I really truly believe that the measurement of success and talent is going to be from those who connect the dots and have more of that generalist experience.
Yeah.
But we're still in a place that, in fact, it almost seems like it's getting worse based on the horror stories I'm hearing from people in the hiring process. But it doesn't make any sense, to be honest. It's not logical. We really look at the way organizations, I think, can operate the best. But
yeah, I mean, the ladder is basically what your book is built to dismantle, right? Structured around the 3 parts: break, pause, rewrite. Can you walk us through like what each of those means and why you felt like that was the arc to tell the story? Don't give too much.
Because this was sorry, I always we talk over each other. What are you saying before?
Oh, I just said, just don't give too much away because everybody should be reading the book.
I know. I'm going to try with the trailer. That's why we're forced to be. Like, if it was 4 hours, we'd keep going. But I want to start. This isn't a book about finding your perfect job. We're not here to give like a 5-step plan to get there. This book is really about the process that we go through. And the process of figuring out the chapters was really interesting because we had to go really deep into the experiences that you're having. So when we think about the break, that is really about like what is happening and who am I now? And my God, I have to kind of let go of this script. And we talk about fear, and I think we'll spend a few minutes on that here in a few minutes. But that staying in the space and recognizing what we go through when the break happens. And the break could be because you've been laid off. And that would have been more my experience. Burnout, which will, the stories talk about that in there, or also knowing that what you're doing isn't what you want to do. And there is a psychological, emotional, spiritual, whatever mental experience we go through when that happens. Where the book one of the origins of the book was my with the publisher we ended up going through to didn't just take our money. You had to actually apply for this program. And they do a visioning session with you, and they do not let you have the questions in advance. So I had no idea what they were going to ask. And all we knew is that we wanted to do a story and a collection of, about women's stories. And they're like, that's not enough. And one of the questions they asked me, which I can't remember, but I can remember the answer, was that I believe that we rush through our transitions. And we move so quickly from A to B that we don't pause. And what I'd realized from the first layoff I had, and I had the luxury to pause, the reality is this is a book more for those in corporate America. We often have the luxury to pause more than we think to. And we live in a society, I'm not stating anything, is that it's all about go, go, go. So to me, the most powerful part of the book and where people are resonating the most is really that pause. And it's, we have this urge to rush is one chapter. This next one is like quieting the noise. Then it's leading into trusting the not knowing and rerouting success on your terms. And when you pause, you can actually hear yourself about some seeds of something new. Once that happens, then you can move into the rewrite. But in order to do that, you really have to define success, not from what everybody else is telling you, but from the inside out. In understanding what you bring to the table, letting go of what you've had in the past, working with the people who are around you, who often see in you what you need to do before you're willing to admit it yourself, and then give yourself the grace and the space to actually become who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, the only pause I've ever taken in my career was the summer I was 17.
All right, Casey, read the book.
I know. Because it's jump, jump, jump. Cash out your vacation time because you never took it.
Right. Right. Right.
Who's paying the rent during a break?
Well, we'll talk about one of our next questions. Coming questions, because that's a really important one.
Yeah.
But I think the fact is that, like, we go through this process pretty much on autopilot. When I think about it, like, I read it and I was like, when was the last time I had like 3 months to just be? And I'm like, I think I was 17. It was like the last summer, because I didn't have a summer when my senior year in high school. So I'm pretty sure it was like when I was 17, my junior year. That was 3 months off.
To rush, to force, to panic, to react. And you said it, like, then we end up applying for the same roles we know that won't put a fire in our belly or make us happy. And, my belief, the second kind of pillar of this book. So I talked about the rushing through the transitions, but the second pillar is my belief that the definition of success is changing rapidly, seeing it, of course, in women, but it's also happening for men and younger generations, which is it has been historically title, status, and money. Mm-hmm. But where has that gotten us?
Yeah.
Right. There's so many of us who are burned out. Like, the rules don't make sense. And part of it is organizationally, or, it used to be, I always, like, when you think about Mad Men and like they had offices with showers in them, I don't know if it worked all day compared to what we go through now. But I do say, like, our return on investment personally and what we give out is just not there anymore. But to get there, to understand that, we have to get off not just the ladder, but the whatever hamster wheel. It takes a while. It takes like 3 months to actually unwind how long we had been into the process, into the reality.
Yeah. It's hard to let go in those moments, right? And which I guess is part of what you include as part of the break part, right? That you have to let go of these things. So I'm curious, what was the hardest for you to let go of?
Money. Money. So, I'd gotten the titles, I had perceived success. And for me, there was a couple of things around the money. One, I already shared. I have done relatively much better than the everybody else in the United States and even the world. But I compared myself. I live in the Bay Area. I have friends with a ton of tech money. I've always had financial insecurity. And the thing that allowed me to let go of that is after I was like, okay, these two things are that, the nonprofit and the book are right in front of me. I called my financial advisor, who happens to be a dear friend of 25 years. And she said, you need to see yourself as an asset, not a liability. You will make money again. And I can't tell you how many times I hold on to that throughout the week. And here's the crazy thing. I have let go of it because I am so committed and I know that I'm where I'm supposed to be. But I had to go through all the things that happened in the book. And there was actually a day, because when you go through the publishing process, you have to read the book out loud multiple times, right? And, as you're going through your revisions. And there was one weekend I had to read the book again. I had to read it. And I realized I needed the book again for myself, because we are so attached to the identities. And it's not just the identities of our own self, but the expectations of success that is put on us. And that's why we have several chapters that talk about the dismantling of what the definition of success is, because the book also reflects it's not a straight line. You are going up and down as you go through the process.
And you mentioned that the book isn't just for women, that a lot of men told you it resonated with them as well. And this is potentially such like a universal experience, but one that nobody really talked about. Too, maybe we didn't even have time to think about it.
Yeah. Well, and that was the origin of the book, is that we were like, we're not talking about it enough. And that's when the publisher was like, this is a different discussion that we're not having enough, and we're not honoring and giving ourselves the grace of this journey that we go on. And so the book is really about the journey, right? Not the answer, but the journey that we go on to find the work that fits. So I came up with this tagline kind of in the book or whatever, and now I've added a third, power of threes. But, what fits, what fuels, and now really what fulfills. What fits changes throughout your life, right? Depending on where you are. And we have to understand the flexibility of our own journey based on, what fits best in our life, depending on the season we're in. What fuels? Reality is we should always have a fire in our belly. Now, there are times that the flame is like so tiny at a job, and that doesn't mean like it should be, all sunshine and roses at your job. But when it goes out at a job, you need to really then move on, because you're not where you are. We all deserve to have the passion. And then fulfillment can look different for different people at different times in your life. But we owe ourselves that. And, as we close out, I will share one of my favorite quotes that closes the book. I won't give it away yet, and this is why it is a human experience.
Yeah.
Right. The book is grounded in the stories of women. We do have some different nuances based on how we've been conditioned, and where we are. But we're all really, I think, questioning, not all, but is this the life that we want to have?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you have the book, like you said, is a lot of different stories, and it's not just your story, right? You have other women's stories, and some of them they just seem like such brutal stories of things that maybe led to a wake up moment. I mean, you've got example like, Joe quitting on a street corner outside of Dunkin' Donuts. You've got Kimberly spending 6 weeks in the hospital before a company let her go. I mean, these are just amazing stories that you've gathered together this way. What were you thinking, and what led you to say, this is the right story to include? This is adding something to the overall message. And how are you looking at that?
I mean, personally, Nicola and I, she knew 3 people whose stories that would relate. I know, like, how many do we have? 15? I can't remember. But it was through the women that some of them I'd known for years. Some I had just recently met, but we were talking about this topic. And it was important to us to have it from these different perspectives. And one of the things that you guys had chatted about is like, what were some of the stories that changed how I saw my own transition? And, there were 2 things that really came to mind, is that so many, I wouldn't say all, but for so many of us, it was our partners who saw what we needed to do before we did. And they supported us 100%. And they were able to let go of some of the fear. And so I found that a really interesting theme that happened in so many of the stories. The main one that I took away, and it was from somebody I've known her for years, then reconnected. It's my favorite thing about Arwood is all the people I reconnect with from my past. But she talks about this, and a handful of other people do as well. But this idea of the through line, she is now finding the work that actually reflects who she was younger in her career, and that she had moved away from it and she found it again. And there's messaging and journaling around that idea of like, there's a truth that has been with you for a long time. And for me, the through line was at 25, I knew I wanted to create the conditions for people to love what they do every day. Because I believe in the ripple effect. And this is my way to rationalize being in corporate America, that if people are happy at work, they'll be happy at home, in their communities, blah, 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 with their children. Right. And then when she said that, I looked back, I was like, that's what I've been doing with my life and my career the whole time. And here I'm now manifesting it in spades. So, these moments, these stories, what we're trying to do is that hopefully creating experiences that people can relate. And I think everybody could probably relate to one part of everybody's story in every chapter.
Let's go back to, when I asked what was the hardest thing to let go of, you said it was the money part. So if we go dig a little deeper into this, I mean, you have a great example of this, right? Because you moved cross country for a job, and it was a job that let you go, right? So how do you tell someone, you alluded to this a little bit earlier, but the premise of the book, right, to choose, not chase. How do you kind of give someone that message when they're probably thinking in the back of their mind, well, that might mean the mortgage doesn't get paid next month?
It's a tough one. I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, but the reality is we actually have more money than we think we do. And we have more when we lean in to the fear. And so let's spend a few minutes on fear. It's something that because this is the barrier, and we talk about fear in the book. And the reality is there's a lot of fear in the system in our entire society now with work, except with AI. But what this is the first thing I share, and I think it's I think it's in the chapter about fear. It should be, is an acronym that I grew up with in my past, which is fear, false evidence appearing real. And what happens, and this is psychology and just the nature of who we are, is when there's uncertainty, fear slips into the driver's seat. And we're wired for, fear is wired into us for survival. And when we're in a transition and nothing feels certain and the roadmap has gone blank, fear, it becomes a tyrant, right? It shrinks the possibilities, it amplifies the risk. So appreciating that we have all of these realities that we need to do, but we actually have more than what we need. And I've said to people who, have asked a similar question, I was like, is your McMansion worth your happiness? And happiness, I want to say, is, I want to take away from that word because that's not a destination, right? Is it worth being miserable at your job?
Right.
And I think that's something people have to really question. Is the car that you have worth it? Is being able to, do $10,000 trips to Hawaii worth the other 48 weeks, if you're so lucky to have 4 weeks off, being miserable?
Yeah.
And I'll close with one of my favorite quotes. I love quotes, so you'll see that there's many in the books. But Eleanor Roosevelt said, "You gain strength, courage, and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face."
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, those are all the right questions that everyone should be asking, right? And if you're following the premise of, around choosing, not chasing that, back to the corporate ladder and the whole thing that we've all been trained to think about over the years. I think what's really interesting though, is that just even going through that much, and what you just mentioned about the fear, as anyone starts to think about that themselves, it really forces you to think a little deeper than you're used to. And I think one of the premises you also follow in the book is that it's not just about a passive reading experience, right? The whole point is to get you thinking about these things for your own career to get you reflecting on them and to even just start writing about it, right? And I think you encourage a lot of journaling from chapter to chapter in the book to really help you kind of guide yourself through and make yourself think about all of these different things as you're analyzing where are you in your career.
Absolutely. And one of the things I will say is that and I'm coming back to the through line. So I'd actually started writing, and I remembered that I had journals for the last 7 years. My favorite journal, which came right after the break that happened for me that we were alluding to, talking about earlier, that one is lost somewhere. But I went back to my journals and could see my own journey and how I got here. And I had a through line that one of them was, and it was from like 8 years ago, I had like a word dump that said like community, connections, shared purpose, all this stuff that little did I know that, retail women in tech, one of our tagline is, connections grow as community grounds us. And so I'd have that through line. And so for me, I don't constantly journal. I go through ebbs and flows, but when we stop and we journal, and we allow ourselves to have that thinking, it forces the pause. And what has been so fascinating to me is how many people have told me they've had to pause while they're reading the book.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's great, because I think in any good book is marked up with notes and highlighters.
Yeah, exactly.
Little dog-eared corners.
Yeah.
I have a couple books that are just trashed. I've read them so many times. I mean, if it's squares around it or a circle or underline, they're three different. It's like it's a system. Because I'm going to come back to the square,
right.
And like peruse for like my squares versus my circles. But I think it is very true. I'm guilty of this. I didn't take a break, but I did take a moment to write down and readjust. That I did discover, like, I was chasing goals that I set when I was 12, 13 years old. I'm like, that was before I even went to high school or college. That was before I ever had a job. Do I still want this? Is this still the destination? I'm very destination focused, right? I kind of skip the whole being present part. But just even like writing down, like, what do I want now? Now that I'm educated, now that I have work experience, now that I've been in the world, now that I'm like an adult, what do I actually want? Do I want these things that I'm still chasing as like my definition of success, or what I want my life to look like, or things of that nature? And holy cow, it took me 6 months to like just kind of come up with a new list.
Well, there's a lot of decoupling
I want to live in France
because your own definitions of what you think success is going to be, but then the definition of success in our society.
Yeah.
And we don't put a value on fulfillment and alignment. And I do think so many of the circumstances, in particular with the amount of layoffs, and that's part of why we felt like the book was really going to hit in a zeitgeist moment for a whole host of reasons. Yeah. But, and we also will do like the 5 things. What are your goals? Blah, blah, blah. And what we really hoped with this book, and I'm going to say it for like the umpteenth time, is that it's a process. And there's so much unraveling that we have to do to get there.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've been doing it again, where I don't want to be working towards this dream. I want to live my dream every single day now in the present. It's not in the future, it's today. And that's probably been like the hardest adjustment of changing this mindset that was just chiseled into my being from a very young age, to try and say, like, I don't want to wait to live. I've been waiting to live. Now I'm like, well, shit, I think I missed out on a lot. I'd like to live a little bit now.
Well, and this comes back to like this idea. So I'm going to pick on a girlfriend that happened. And she is one of maybe at least 100 stories. I've had the opportunity to talk to, I don't know, almost 1,000 women in the last couple of years, which is crazy, but wonderful. But she had gotten laid off. She had an insane severance package. She was an EVP at a huge media company. And she had gone through a lot of trauma. And that's something we don't, I mentioned it for a hot second, I think earlier, that there is a lot of trauma that people go through in their jobs, and we're just told to get over it. She called me like the next day, and, what is she doing? She's on LinkedIn. She's already networking, but she's like, well, I'm going to go do yoga and I'm going to walk, in, Central Park or whatever it is. And we immediately move into like creating to-do list and checklist on taking care of ourselves. And, one of the things I did that was so powerful when I had that first layoff is I didn't make a to-do list. And any of you who know me, I'm a go, high productive person, but I sat where I was. And, I'd gotten the advice of like, don't look for a job right away. Give yourself a little bit of time. But my friend says to me, I don't know how to do that. I can't do it. It's not me. That's one of my favorite things. It's not me.
It's not me.
It's not, well, because it's never been you. You've been insanely successful. How did you get to where you are? It's because you never did it. But you can do it. And I'm coming to come back. It usually takes 3 months. And then at 3 months, everybody's like, oh, this is great. Because they've taken the time to actually sit and hear themselves.
Yeah. Well, I could listen to you all day. I'm very curious. Why are you not narrating the audiobook yourself?
Yeah.
And what was you mentioned? I want to hear this story because I just pay attention a little bit more.
This really hard because I do think that anybody who knows me would want to hear it from me, and the authenticity and the heart. And obviously, right, this is something that's near and dear to me. And also, a platform that this isn't the only book, right? I want to do one around divorce and perimenopause, kids going back to school, right? This idea of how we move through the process and the transitions that we get to the place that we actually are. But you guys, it was going to take, first of all, I live in a Berkeley bungalow. So it's super small, but you have to be in the same place every single time. When I was writing, I could, do ebbs and flows. I could write till 2 a.m. or write 6 hours on a Saturday. That wasn't going to be the case with narrating the book. I had to read that book out loud for publishing. Jesus, it's hours and hours and hours. And then you have the mistakes and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I'm not going to give it what it needs. And the book shouldn't feel stressful. So part of the publishing is that you can go and get people to audit. It's a part of the package. Okay. So you put, the whole profile, who you're looking for, blah, blah, blah. You guys, they on average, the most they'd ever seen people respond. I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but this is because now I have another to do.
I'll ring your bell.
The highest, they normally get 40 to 50 people on average. The highest they had seen as 115. As of this morning, and I'm like, can we please close this? I'm at 196 people.
Wow.
And the amount of women who told their own story and the transitions they were going through. And there's one in particular, there were so many, but I wanted to pick one. And what was so important to me is that somebody could understand it. And so many they shared their experiences around the career transition. But this woman said, my name is Ada, and I'm blazing my way through a career transition right now. I'd worked in health records for 11 years. I've had my kids. I was diagnosed with and defeated cancer. Last year, I quit that, and by the way, I'm reading this, guys, quit that comfortable hospital job to focus on a new business. And now I'm thrilled to have discovered audiobook narrating. Sometimes the path to a more satisfying career loops back on itself because I actually started in theater. She's not even read the book. And that comes back to the idea of the through line.
Yeah.
Right. But now, God, you guys, if I listened 1 minute to each one of these, now I've got another several set of hours to find the right person. But I believe that obviously it's connecting, right? If there are not many people who wanted to do it.
Right.
Now they just need to go buy it.
And
It
I'm,
might,
I'm going to guess too that as you went through that list of people, there's nothing that tells anybody that, that this is a retail career thing, right? It's just a general human career growth evolution. What do you do? If anything, retail is just a backdrop
yeah,
into
I
this,
mean,
right?
we talked about it. I mean, it happens to be women in retail. And when I'm talking to the retail world, we'll highlight that. But
Mhm.
it otherwise is agnostic to,
Yeah.
like we said, gender. But I also think there's the value that's for those that are younger. Like I did a podcast with our friend Rich and with students,
Mhm.
and it's allowing them to think differently from
Yeah.
the on, right? And their fears and working through that. And it also makes sense if you're, in retirement. So it really does. It's a place for, I think, anybody to honor any season that they're in
Mhm.
their career. So,
Yeah. That makes sense. Okay, so I've kind of been saving this one, picking out some things that are interesting from the book. Everyone's sort of heard of the classic like deathbed question on what would you do? And you like to take this and change it around into something that's probably a little more relatable, which I like the way you reframe this. And that's you ask someone, what would you tell a niece or a nephew to do? Do you tell them to go chase the money or to just follow what actually brings them to life?
yeah, I mean, because the deathbed one, right? It's kind of nebulous, right? And more
Hmm.
esoteric, and it's far away,
Yeah,
and we all fear death, right?
right,
So it's not really
right.
one we. It's a valid question,
Hmm.
and I think it's kind of a universal question. So many people have, but I think when we frame it to, yeah, what would you tell your kids or your niece or nephew to do? And
Hmm.
that was one of the questions I asked myself
Yeah.
when I made this bold decision. I haven't had a paycheck, in a really long time. But would I tell him to follow the money? Would I tell him to follow the McMansion or the BMW?
Hmm.
No, I would tell him to follow their passion.
Yeah.
And I think that when we create it and it becomes more relatable, and this one of my favorite quotes, and when we close out, I'll share the last one. I think it's really important also for us to think about, but we cannot become what we need to be by remaining what we are. And
Hmm.
so I think when we ask that question, right, I think we open up the aperture around really what we need to be, or who we are versus where we've been.
Yeah.
It's good. If
That's great.
and you have a daughter, so you're doing this in practice.
Well, I've got two kids. I mean, I have three, and like my oldest is, struggling. He's a musician
Yeah.
and he went to music school, but then he's also like, he's a classic brain. He's a math guy.
Mhm.
He then switched into nuclear engineering. Now he's going back. Should I do music? That's where the joy is.
Mhm.
So it's not a question we ask ourselves when we're 45. It's a question we're asking ourselves at a really young age
So
as
if
well.
someone's reading this dedication and is in mid panic right now, resume open, coffee's cold, sitting out on their desk, what do you want them to do the second they close this book?
I want them to believe. And by the way, I love the conclusion of the book. So anybody who reads it, do not miss that. But put simply, you owe yourself a life that makes sense from the inside. You owe that to yourself. And you would want that for anybody, not just your kids, your friends, the world around you. And my belief is that whatever it looks like, if it's aligned, it will be sustainable. And if it's sustainable, it will be powerful. So I'm going to close this out with the quote that I close out the book with. Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive.
Yeah. I love that. That's a
Me
great way
too.
to close it out. Yeah, it is.
Make me cry on a podcast.
Casey is having a moment.
Just imagine if we all, we recentered what purpose means.
Yeah.
And purpose is
Happy people will make a happy world.
yeah, and it doesn't have to be some big idea. Just take a tiny little step towards what excites you.
Yeah.
You don't have to change your entire career either.
Mhm.
This have to be, we talk about it. You don't have to have this huge plan.
Right. It's just one step at a time. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Shannon, thank you so much for joining us today and walking us through all these themes and messages from the book. We didn't even have enough time to get even deeper into what all the latest and greatest things you're doing with Arwit since the last time you were on the show. But this is, I think, the conversation we really wanted to have. So I think that this is exactly what we were hoping for. And it certainly gets past like the polished version that everybody comes to a podcast with, hoping to do all very, very straight-laced kind of thing. So hopefully everyone takes away a lot from this conversation. I think everyone will. If anybody in the audience, wants to either reach out to you, learn more about Retail Women in Tech, want to learn where to find the book, obviously we're hoping everybody goes out, get the book, go read it right now. Or they just want to get more involved in any of these things. What's the best way for them to do that and reach out to you?
A couple of different ways. Shannon at retailwomenintech.org. And if you are interested in joining Arwit, it's no paywall. We don't believe access should cost money, so you can join that, retailwomenintech.org. You can find me on LinkedIn, and shocker, the book's on Amazon. So all you have to do is say,
super easy to find.
And it's not you that's gotten his book above me. I don't know how to do it. I decided not to cheat the system with Amazon, but you can find it there.
We'll go do our damnedest for you. Thank you, Shannon. I have to say, before I joined the community, there were so many moments that I felt like I was alone and I had a unique story or journey. And when I joined the community, I was just like, this is normal. This can be normal to a lot of people. This is not something unique that I'm all by myself. I'm on an island and nobody is it's not relatable to anyone. And I think that it feels so good to hear these stories, to read these stories, to see how other people moved through and got to the other side, and what different versions of what's next can look like. Because sometimes you just gotta hear a bunch of versions of how other people tackled these problems. So I really, thank you for spending the time to do all these things that benefit us while you sit there and don't get paid.
And I want to say, I say it in the book, I say it all the time, I'm Irish. You know what we're good at? Storytelling.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how we bring people together, right? Every culture and, background has different things great at. And I believe stories is what makes us uniquely human. And it is the most powerful way to drive inspiration and change in this world. So fostering the spaces, be it through the book or through the community, which is all about impact and outcomes, both the book and the community are about that, for people to find the best work of their career.
Thank you. And everyone watching or listening, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, leave us a review, share it with someone in the middle of their own break pause, somebody that needs a rewrite. We'll see you next time on Retail Transformers. You loved this episode, right? Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Good Pods. And if you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe before you go. I'm Casey Golden.
Follow us on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, Threads, and Instagram, and subscribe to our Substack for highlights and bonus content. For transcripts and guest info, visit retailrazor.com. I'm Ricardo Belmar.
Thanks for joining us on Retail Transformers, part of the Retail Razor Podcast Network.
Until next time, stay sharp, be bold, and keep transforming retail. This is the Retail Razor, Retail Transformers.